safety, where locally based squadrons just went to avoid a run-in with Florence.
New video, we take you inside Hurricane Florence with the hurricane hunters. Let's get started.
Good evening. 13 News now begins in storm mode as we continue to track a monster storm. Hurricane Florence takes aim at the East Coast.
Live now to Duck, North Carolina. North Carolina's governor giving the order, get out while you can.
Back here in Hampton Roads, preparations are in full swing. Store shelves empty, gas stations busy, and more than 1 million people are under a tropical storm watch. We are in storm mode. Thanks for joining us for this special coverage of Hurricane Florence. I'm Regina Mobley.
And I'm David Allen. Virginia and the Carolinas remain under states of emergency. Our weather technology is made for situations like this to bring you an accurate idea of what you and your family can expect over these next few days.
Our team is ready to bring you whatever Florence brings. We're keeping you covered from the ocean front to the Outer Banks.
For the latest on what's happening right now, we begin with Chief Meteorologist Jeff Lawson.
All right. Well, in the very short term, we've been tracking some showers and storms. Those are now up near Richmond, and there's some actual flood advisories up there from really heavy rain from this line of storms. Meanwhile, look at all these bright colors here down to the south. Those are various watches and warnings. We have a tropical storm warning from the eastern shore south, including Poquoson, actually Mobjack Bay, then the Poquoson area, back down through Hampton, back down into south side from Chesapeake on to the east. That is until Friday. That is storm winds sustained over 40 miles per hour, tropical storm force strength. Then from the state line down to the south to the Wright Brothers Memorial Bridge and then back over here to land. That is the Albemarle Sound. From there north, we have that little sliver. That is a hurricane watch. Well, let me go back to that really quickly. And then we have the hurricane warning from around southern shores to the south. And that includes Turtle County, mainland Dare, Hyde County, Washington County, those areas south of the Albemarle Sound. Here's the front, by the way, that a week or week and a half ago looked like it might pick up the storm. And we realized long ago that it would not. So now high pressure is building in, and that is eventually going to force this thing to slow up even more. But at the same time, we're watching what's likely to be Joyce, and that, I think, is some of what is influencing a little bit of the extended prognostication with this storm. So here's a closer view. Very clearly, it is a well-defined storm. It might not be in the dead center anymore of those bright clouds, but it is pretty close to it. So the current winds are actually up to 140. They were as of the 5 o'clock advisory, expected to become close to a Category 5 storm as it gets even warmer water here northeast of the Bahamas, and then be a Category 4 as it approaches, in general, the southeast coast. Not its closest approach, because the closest approach has it Friday afternoon as a Cat 3. We hope it will weaken. Right now, the projection would be to weaken down to about a Cat 3 storm. After that, we've been talking about this for days. There's a huge area of high pressure blocking everything up across the Ohio Valley. It could shift it, keep it stalled. It could stall it for a day or two, then head it to the south. That's why a lot of the models are starting to come in with more of a left-hand turn, a really significant left-hand turn. I think both of these are going to shift significantly south once we get another run or two just to confirm things. But by Saturday afternoon near Raleigh and then Sunday inland, I have a feeling those will be off and off considerably. So here's what we know. An East Coast landfall is likely as a major hurricane. It is looking more and more, at least for now, like it'd be North Carolina and South Carolina, and maybe both, even staying near the coast as it backs up. Life-threatening rains could stay southwest. In fact, would absolutely stay south and west of us if any of the current tracks take it where it is expected to go. Now let's compare the American model. We're going to turn around here, and that's in yellow, with red, which is the European model. They have been fairly different over the last number of days. As we have gone into today, they have started to match up very, very nicely in terms of the confidence factor. But bad news for areas down to our south. Look what happens. They both come in here again around Wilmington or just a tiny bit northeast of there. And then earlier, the Euro brought it down the coastline, but the GFS didn't. Well, now they both do. The GFS, I know it's showing it up here. Well, that's after it brings it down and then brings it back up. So both of them have it heading down right near the coastline. Our odds of getting hurricane force winds also pretty low. We'll talk about that and a lot more when I come back.
Jeff, thanks so much. Live now to Ocracoke, where time is running out to evacuate. We know tonight that ferry service will be suspended tomorrow morning. NCDOT says nearly 800 cars and 1,600 people have been carried off of that island. Neighbors in parts of Dare and Currituck counties are being ordered to leave.
But the decision to leave isn't an easy one. Some people fear they won't be able to get back onto Hatteras Island after the storm. 13 News Now was there as crews prepped NC-12. They're working to prevent overwash on the highway.
That is a critical link for those trying to leave the Outer Banks. Tonight, many people are still weighing the decision to stay or to go. 13
News Now reporter Robert Boyd joins us now live from Jeanette's Pier with the latest. Robert.
Well, walking along the beach here in Nags Head, the wind has definitely picked up a little bit, but nothing too extreme at all. And a lot of people saw that, and we're out here on the beach today, sunbathing, surfing, thinking no big deal. It's a beautiful day. However, as we know, it's going to get a lot worse. And the quite opposite inland, we saw a lot more people working hard, making sure they were preparing for this hurricane. We saw people boarding up their windows, making sure that they were prepared for the worst. Some of them say their biggest fear is flooding, water possibly getting into their homes, while others say it's the wind. They're worried their roof could get ripped off. We spoke with a father and son who drove all the way from Charlotte just to make sure their home was secure. We also spoke with a couple of residents who said during Hurricane Matthew, they ignored the warnings and they want to make sure that they're prepared this time around.
No one thought it was going to hit here. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, the house was rocking, and I looked out in the parking lot and there was whitecaps on the parking lot. There was so much water flooded in here.
Now, coming up tonight at 9:30, we're going to hear from some of the tourists who decided not to listen to the mandatory evacuation and decided to stay an extra day or two, in some cases waiting for the last minute before they abandon their vacation. Very interesting to hear what those tourists have to say. All that coming up tonight at 9:30. Live in Nags Head, Robert Boyd, 13 News Now.
All right, let's bring things back to Hampton Roads with a live look at Portsmouth. The city is preparing for the potential impact from Hurricane Florence. Joining me now in the studio is Portsmouth Mayor John Rowe. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Now, many of us know that you are the former city manager, so you have been directly involved in hurricane preparations as the former city manager.
I have, but this is my first hurricane as mayor. But let me say this, I'm so proud of our current city manager, Dr. Lydia Patton and her team. They have well prepared the city of Portsmouth.
So you have a beautiful shoreline on the waterfront. Tell me how you have prepared the waterfront area.
Well, first, our hurricane planning started early this year, in January, matter of fact. And we have equipped our fire department with high water vehicles, with a fleet of boats that can pass down flooded streets. Our fire department has been training for hurricane recovery. They have studied the past current hurricanes, not only in Hampton Roads, but in other places like Harvey last year, determined lessons learned, and figured out a strategy for Portsmouth.
We have only about a minute left. What advice would you give to homeowners and families right now who are watching this storm blow through?
Watch out for the water and be safe. Hampton Roads is flat as a pancake, and even though people may think that they're safe in Zone B, you can still be flooded in Zone B and Zone C. And heed the warnings too. If citizens have an order to evacuate, they should. They have a right to stay there, but that could get pretty dicey.
Do you have a non-emergency phone number for people? And of course, if there's a true emergency, 911.
Sure, we have Dr. Patton has set up a hurricane help desk, and that number is 407-9143. Now look, to make sure I got the number right, and I'll say it again, 407-9143. 9143. And they're taking calls on any concern about this terrible storm.
Mayor John Rowe, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you.
David.
All right, now HRT is getting ready to roll back service. Listen closely if you rely on transit starting tomorrow. Light rail and ferries will be suspended. Thursday, buses will stop rolling if Florence becomes a problem. We're told service could be stopped through the weekend. Flights in and out of Hampton Roads are expected to be impacted too. We're starting to see the first round of cancellations at Norfolk International Airport. Some airlines are waiving fees if you need to change your plans, and that includes the following airlines: Allegiant, American, Delta, Frontier, Southwest, and United. JetBlue caps fares on flights to and from Richmond International Airport. They're limiting the cost to $149. The airline is also capping fares on flights in and out of Savannah, Charleston, Charlotte, and Raleigh.
We have brand new video of a hurricane hunter flying through Hurricane Florence. NOAA just released this video of today's flight aboard the Air Force Reserve plane. The aircraft is packed with sensors to gather data on the storm. Now, aircraft at Naval Station Norfolk and Naval Air Station Oceana are flying out of harm's way. It comes as the last Navy ships leave Hampton Roads. This is new video of some of the jets landing in Ohio. It comes as nearly 30 ships are sent out to sea. Some are staying in port because they're undergoing maintenance. Navy brass made the order yesterday. They tell 13 News Now the ships are able to handle storms like Florence better when they are underway. Extra precautions are being taken to keep the ships safe.
Tomorrow, the Coast Guard is expected to update us on their plan for Florence. They are also expected to close the main shipping channel in and out of Hampton Roads. Right now, the Coast Guard put the region's harbors under port condition X-ray. That means large cargo ships are either preparing to leave or have permission to remain in port.
President Trump is declaring states of emergency for Virginia and the Carolinas. The president was briefed by the head of FEMA today. He says the federal government is ready to respond to Florence. FEMA leaders warn the storm will be a devastating event. Now, here's another look at Hurricane Florence. We're expecting new data when the National Hurricane Center releases its next advisory. That is coming up at 11 o'clock tonight.
All right, Jeff is updating his full forecast when 13 News Now returns in storm mode.
"13 News Now" meteorologist Evan Stewart, WVEC TV.
All right, tracking Florence, and of course it continues to be a huge worry up and down the mid-Atlantic, all the way down to the southeast coastline. Talked about it earlier, a lot of people just joining us. We have a little bit of lightning and thunder, some really heavy thunderstorms right now near Richmond, causing some flooding there. That is not associated at all with Florence. Florence is still 780 or something miles away. This is a tropical storm warning near the coastline from Poquoson down through Hampton and then south side, including Norfolk, Portsmouth, Virginia Beach, and Chesapeake. South of the state line, hurricane watch, which means conditions are possible to reach hurricane strength in terms of the winds. South, though, of the Albemarle Sound and south of the Wright Brothers Bridge, then we have the hurricane warning, and that is all until Friday. This is Isaac, likely to get pulled up into the central Atlantic and not do much. Helene, likely to traverse across areas toward the Caribbean. This is likely to be Joyce, and I think that is causing a little bit of the shift that we're seeing in some of the models, because with Florence, this is likely to become Joyce within 5 days, about a 70% chance. But even if it isn't, its pressure could be influencing somewhat what is going on here with Florence. Look at the very concentric look to the storm earlier, and now that's a little bit of dry air. Notice the lack there of cloudiness and that blue streak where you can see all the way down to the ocean. That is indicative of some dry air starting to come in. So that would be great news if we could knock this thing down some. But it's really got warm water that it's ready to go over. The upper air shear is supposed to be light, so that should allow good outflow up aloft. So a lot of factors working right now in the favor of even more strengthening. Although on the other side, as I just showed you, there's at least some dry air out there which could impact things somewhat. Keep your fingers crossed. By Thursday afternoon, it's not too far from shore, but sitting off, I don't know, maybe 60, 80 miles. And then it takes an entire day to go onto shore. This is by Friday afternoon. That is because, again, a big area of high pressure is building up over the Ohio Valley. And that's, I sort of use the analogy like a lineman protecting their quarterback. Big and strong, high pressure just says, you can't come through here. So everything gets sort of slowing up and says, okay, which way can I go? There just aren't any steering currents. And then by Saturday, they've slowed it up even more, and it is sitting here as a tropical storm, still bringing tremendous amounts of rain. On the right-hand side, we could have tornadoes. Haven't talked a lot about that. That is very, very possible. And I think they will change this, especially with some of the even 18Z models starting to come in and really mimic the Euro, which heads it straight down to the south. So I think that is likely to change. Again, this could all revert back, but for right now, we're getting pretty serious agreement with some of our major models, including the Canadian, well, not the Canadian, I haven't looked at that one today, but I was going to say the American versus the European model. They were very different, of course, a week ago, and we said we didn't believe the American model. We were leaning toward the Euro, and now look how similar they are. The Euro's from this morning, the American model's from this afternoon, and they're almost identical here around Wilmington up to maybe Camp Lejeune, and then it comes to a halt. And then what happens? This is 24 hours later, it's barely moved. It's like, where do I go? Somebody steer me someplace. And eventually, with high pressure building in, that starts to shove it down toward the coast. Euro says it makes landfall, a second landfall at Charleston. The GFS says a second landfall just north of Charleston. So some really serious agreement with those two models. And then they both take them back up here, dump heavy rain across the mountainous areas of North Carolina and South Carolina. So in terms of flooding, we could have some tidal flooding, some rain flooding. This is the preliminary look at the American model, and you can see the rain is significant, but starting here, that is where it really builds down to our south. So as we put the wider view, this is the exact same thing. You can see 4 to 8 here, but 15 to 30 down to our south. We could also have some tidal flooding. Let's go to Evan Stewart to talk about that.
That's right, Jeff. As you saw in that simulation, we have a lot of those easterly winds for a few days. It just really depends on the track of the storm. So we want to briefly go over some of the historic tides here in Hampton Roads. And you can see the big Chesapeake Potomac hurricane. That's the big one. Tides at Sewell's Point got up to 8 feet, and Hurricane Isabel just under 8 feet. So when we take a look at some of these numbers coming up, some of the predictions as we get into Friday, tides at Sewell's Point late Thursday night into Friday morning around 5.5 feet. Probably should nudge that up a little bit more, closer to 6, and I think that we could see some levels coming up around 5.5, 6 feet along the Bay Bridge Tunnel, also in Yorktown. Just to give you an idea, that's still about 2 feet lower than what we saw with Isabel if everything continues on this current track. Jeff?
But also, we need to remember beyond that time, potentially if we still have an easterly flow and the storm, instead of going inland and weakens, is still sitting there maybe east of Myrtle Beach, then the the tidal flood levels would be increasing pretty significantly. So we need to keep that in mind, see whether it comes inland and weaken or goes to the south. Here's the Euro and the rainfall potential, 30 to 40 inches down near Charleston. So again, we will continue to watch for exactly where that is going. But in general, we're talking about a storm system that is right now very, very, very likely to come ashore or just touch the shoreline right about Wilmington or Camp Lejeune. And then from there, it could go west, it could go south, southwest. Those are the most, maybe even northwest, but that's unlikely at this point.
Wow,
right.
That's a lot of rain.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
Most I've ever seen.
Yeah, me too. All right, thanks.
Thanks,
Jeff.
Well, we verify how important water is to your emergency kit when we come back.
Back now with a familiar sight across the region. 13 News Now reporter Evan Watson spotted this at a Virginia Beach Harris Teeter. On the left, take a look at that. That is the supply at 10:30 this morning. And on the right, the supply just 2 hours later. That is a completely new pallet of water right there. As the water flies off the shelves, we're hearing from some of you asking how necessary the mad rush for water is.
That's right. The Verify team is on it. 13 News Now Verify reporter Jason Puckett found the answer.
Every time a hurricane starts barreling towards a state, you start seeing social media posts like this. The shelves for bread and water are always empty, and you start seeing dozens of posts saying stock up now. But keep in mind, we're still a few days from Florence's landfall, so do we really need to run out and stock up on water? Well, let's verify that. Our sources are FEMA and the Red Cross. First up, Jonathan McNamara from the Red Cross.
What we've seen in disasters across the country is that some people will find themselves in a situation where rescue workers can't get you for a number of days. The families that take those steps are in a much better situation than the families that don't, because it could be days before rescue workers can get access to you.
Both FEMA and Red Cross list water as #1 on their checklists for storm preparedness, and they say about a gallon per person per day will do the trick. And McNamara says even if those lines are long and the storm path looks like it's not going to hit you,
better safe than sorry. In these situations, the tracks of the storms are uncertain. That's the beauty of a hurricane, is it's going to give you days in advance to take those steps to prepare.
And FEMA details their best practices for building that emergency supply. In addition to 1 gallon per person per day, they say buy bottled water when possible, use plastic 2 liters if you fill your own, avoid glass containers as they could break, and boil any water you're not sure about before you drink it. So while it may seem daunting to go stand in a long line or go store hunting to find supplies, experts say having water on hand before the storm is crucial to making it through. That's verified. And folks, we're going to be diving into a lot more topics as Florence continues to approach the coast. If you have any questions you want us to look into, send us an email. With your Verify, I'm Jason Puckett. Back to you.
All right, Jason, whichever the way the wind blows, the Verify team is here to help. If you see something about the storm online you don't think is true, get our attention on Facebook or Twitter. You can also email the team at verify@13newsnow.com. Next, our extended storm mode coverage takes us to Virginia Beach as the resort city braces for the possible effects of Hurricane Florence.
Then we're live with how you can help prepare yourself for the potential of power outages.
Hey, we're still out here at Townsend tonight where people are still getting food and supplies for the oncoming storm.
13 News Now continues in storm mode as we monitor a potentially dangerous situation.
Hurricane Florence is churning off the coast. The impact yet to be seen. Thanks for joining us. I'm Regina Mobley.
And I'm David Allen. The track has shifted, but Florence remains a dangerous hurricane. Chief Meteorologist Jeff Lawson is monitoring the latest for us. Jeff.
Yeah, and we have a lot to talk about, so let's get right to it. First, want to start with the watches, the warnings, and I'll just very quickly mention big thunderstorms have moved out of the sort of edge of the viewing area and up toward Richmond, where you have flood advisories up there. But a tropical storm warning until Friday afternoon is the state line up through the Pocosin area, and then, of course, east of about the Suffolk line. Then you can see from the state line down through our northeast North Carolina counties, that's where we have the watch. The hurricane watch is in effect until Friday, and then the hurricane warning is in effect south of the Albemarle Sound and goes all the way down to South Carolina. Here's the storm. We have a number of other systems, Isaac, Helene, and this one's likely to be Joyce. What happened to G? Well, Gordon was out in the middle of the Atlantic and died a long, long time ago. So here is Florence. Again, right now, winds of 140, but gusting to 165. Expected to be close to the coast as a Category 4 storm. And then the thinking is weakening perhaps to a 3 somewhere near Wilmington or on up toward Morehead City, like Camp Lejeune area. But really, that we know. That is extremely likely to be where the storm is by Friday. Where it goes after that is still uncertain. It's unlikely to come up the coastline. It's either possible that it would continue up here toward maybe Roanoke, although that's still not terribly likely. It's most likely that it either sort of takes a curl back inland or halts for a complete day, sits there, and then gets shoved to the southwest. That is what several of the computer models, including what's traditionally the #1 model, the Euro, does with it. So we've seen a shift south and west with the 4 and 5 day period here with the plots for those time frames. That came in earlier at the 5 o'clock advisory. By the 11 o'clock, I have a feeling they will slow it up and maybe shift it even a little more south. We'll talk about what that does for us coming up here in just a minute. So the GFS, the American model, has been really wrong with this storm. Why am I showing it then? Because it now is finally matching the others, which just adds credence to all the others. But look at the ensembles and how they sort of swing it around. Well, this was as of this morning, the 8 o'clock model run. The brand new one is out. We're not showing it. This one isn't showing it because it waits until all of the GFS runs are in to be able to show all of them at the same time. So I can tell you now that the red one here now halts it right here at Wilmington, just like the Euro, and takes it just southwest along the coastline the whole way, and then brings it in southern areas of South Carolina, just like the Euro. So that is a shift. Rainfall would still be a concern here, but it would be heaviest and life-threatening down to the south. Storm surge predictions range from 4 feet, which is nuisance flooding, to as high as 7.8. That is Isabel-like flooding. The official forecast is down around 5 to 5.5. I have a feeling that is going to have to be knocked up some, and I'll tell you why. Here is the chance of 74 knot winds, which are 74 mile per hour winds, which is hurricane force, not likely to get to us. But more importantly, how long do the winds last at tropical storm force strength? A big difference over 2 days of those winds versus 3 days of winds like that. And if the new predictions are right, and the storm sits for a couple days extra somewhere down here near North or South Carolina, that would allow 2 extra days of tropical storm force winds or close to it to pile up the water here. So we could still have some very significant tidal flooding. That would actually be worse for us in terms of a storm surge than if the storm comes inland and rapidly weakens. It would be better for us in terms of the wind, like the damaging wind, and definitely better for us in terms of the rainfall. So it's sort of a trade-off. That is something we're going to have to watch carefully, and we'll talk a lot more about that in the upcoming days.
Jeff, thanks for that. Live storm mode coverage continues right now in Virginia Beach.
That's right. We found a very quiet ocean front today. The city gave away free sand to anyone who needs it to fill their own sandbags.
Around a ton of sand was dumped at the Sportsplex earlier today. Now, as night falls, residents are preparing for Florence.
13 News Now reporter Megan Perrier joins us live with the work that's being done right now.
David, Regina, people are still out getting food and supplies here in Town Center tonight. Earlier today, we were out at the Sportsplex where tons of people came out to get sand that the city of Virginia Beach provided. Now, that sand isn't the only precaution that the city wants you to take at this point in time. They say that if you're in Zone A, that you should evacuate the area immediately if you possibly can. But if you're planning on bunkering down in the city and staying in the area, you can always call 311 if you need help or transportation. Now, the city is offering buses for those in need that will run 24/7, but once winds are too extreme, those buses will have to stop. We caught up with Toby Snyder today, who got sand and is set for staying into the storm.
You've heard people apologizing and being nice, can I help you? And there hasn't been any bickering or fighting or pushing or anything. And, you know, being September 11th and how the country came together that many years ago and seeing that we still have it, we can still come together when we need each other is just absolutely amazing to me.
Now, if you are in the position that you do need help, you can call 311, and the nearest shelter is going to be Kelm High School. That's opening at 6 o'clock tomorrow night. That is the soonest shelter to open. Live in Virginia Beach, I'm Megan Perrier, 13 News Now.
And we can see very high storm surge even without a direct hit. Here's a look at what that would mean. A storm surge around 5 to 7 feet would send water into homes and businesses. When that gets up to 7 to 12 feet, that's enough to fill the first floor of a building. 12 to 15 feet puts homes underwater. And when you get all the way up to 20 feet of storm surge, that could just overwhelm entire cities.
Well, when severe weather hits, power outages can quickly follow. Dominion Energy has already started to gather crews together and put equipment on standby. So how should you prepare in the event you lose power? Joining us from Dominion Energy is Benita Billingsley Harris. Thank you so much for joining us. There are so many factors to consider: the amount of water that will be dumped on Hampton Roads, the wind, the condition of the soil right now, and so many lessons were learned from Isabel. How do you apply those lessons today?
Well, I tell you, I think we learn something from every hurricane, from every storm that helps us do even better. And our restoration times have gotten significantly quicker. Our communication system have improved. And I think that I want our customers to know that they are in good hands because our crews have made sure that their trucks are gassed up and stocked up. We've asked them to make sure their families are safe and prepared for this storm because once it hits, they're going to be busy.
We remember, Benita, following Isabel, it was the largest outage in the history of Dominion. I believe it was 2 million people without power at one time.
I don't remember the number, but I know that is the storm that everyone says was the big one. And that was a Category 2 storm hurricane when it hit our shores, and now we're looking at a Category 4.
And so one of the things we learned from that is people assume that when their power is out, Dominion knows about it.
Right, and we do not unless you call and report it. Do not assume that we know your power is out. So thank you for bringing that up. It's important that people report their power outages to us because that helps us assess what the problems are and speed up the restoration. And the quickest way to do that, easiest way, is just right from your smartphone. So even if you've lost electricity, you can go right on your smartphone or your other smart device and put in dominionenergy.com, and you can report and check the status of your outages right from there.
If we don't bear the brunt of the storm and other regions do, will Dominion assist other jurisdictions?
Absolutely. If we do not get hit, I mean, we always make sure we take care of home first. But if we don't get hit, we will go and help other neighboring jurisdictions, and we have many of them on standby ready to help us. You may see trucks from Pennsylvania, Florida, as far as Wisconsin and Texas that are standing by ready to help us if we need them.
Benita Billingsley Harris, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
David.
All right, next, Hampton residents, this one's for you. We're talking to city officials about all things storm preparation. 13 News Now is back right after this.
Roman, can we get a mic check from you real quick?
Yeah, how's this? We doing okay?
Yep.
Okay.
After landfall, it's possible Florence will bring wind, pounding rain, and storm surge.
Officials in Hampton are ready. On the phone now is Robin McCormick, communications strategist with the City of Hampton.
Robin, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Good. My question would be, what's on your mind tonight as you prepare the City of Hampton for what's coming?
We are still working, at least in the daylight hours, doing all the cleanup and prep work that we can, and I am eagerly watching your forecast. I don't want this thing to hit anywhere, but the better news for us is a little bit encouraging.
And Robin, certainly you would encourage the residents to be storm ready all the time. What is it that the homeowner can do to reduce the amount of flooding in their neighborhood?
Well, the main thing that we're seeing now is that people are minimizing their own risk by cutting down trees and taking out their trash. But when you put that at the curb and it doesn't get picked up, we've got the potential for that to become debris and knocked over in high winds and to go down the street and flood and block storm drains and roads. So we are really encouraging people, don't put any trash at the curb. It is a violation to do it early, but it can be really dangerous and bad for your neighbors at this point.
Robin, you have a lot of low-lying areas in the City of Hampton. Any concerns about any areas in particular beyond the usual areas?
Well, the thing about this is it's going to be especially tricky. We had flooding on Saturday due to the 7 inches of rain. So in addition to the coastal flooding, which is Zone A, which is where the governor's evacuation has covered, and that's about 18,000 households in Hampton, there are places that know that when there's a whole lot of rain, they're going to flood. So there's a real potential for, depending on how much we get, for that to cause problems beyond the Zone A folks.
All right, Robin McCormick, communications strategist with the City of Hampton. Best of luck to everybody over there, and I'm sure we'll be talking again.
I hope so. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin.
All right, let's check in now with Jeff. Robin talked about the fact that the ground is already wet in Hampton. You talked about even more rain being dumped on the region and a lot of wind, Jeff. This could mean massive power outages.
Potentially. I mean, remember Isabel, we had a really saturated ground, but with that one, we had winds that were more along, 60 mile per hour sustained, and then some gusts above that. This one, we're thinking more like 45, 50 sustained, and then some gusts up to 60. So it's really going to be a close call, but that is absolutely something we're worried about. Whether the storm makes landfall at Wilmington and then goes inland, or whether it makes a first landfall at Wilmington and then drifts south and makes a second landfall in South Carolina, like some of the major computers are now calling for. We're going to get to all that in a minute. We want to start out, though, with a tropical storm warning near the coastline here, including parts of the peninsula from Poquoson down through Hampton. That is until Friday afternoon, and that is, again, the warning for tropical storm force winds, all because of this this hurricane right there. So as it moves closer but heads a little south of us, then we have a hurricane warning. So tropical storm warning, hurricane warning. What's in between? Well, that's a hurricane watch for our northeast North Carolina counties, Currituck, Camden, Pasquotank, Perquimans, et cetera, on through Bertie County. North of the Albemarle Sound and up to the state line, that is a hurricane watch, meaning hurricane conditions are possible. Hurricane conditions are probable when you get down south of Nags Head, at least in some gusts, if not some sustained winds of that. Again, here is the storm, very, very well defined. A little bit of a difference. At the beginning of this, you saw it was right in the middle of that sort of donut shape, and now look at how this little blue is coming in. That's some dry air. Hasn't affected it just yet, but as some of that mixes in, has a chance to at least temporarily weaken it a little bit. The more dry air we can get, the better, because it is expected to be a strong force. Not out of the question if it could become a Category 5, but then likely as it gets near the coast, going to start to run into that high pressure that's like pushing it and trying to keep it away, so it will slow down. It will get a little more wind shear at that point and hopefully be weakening. So they're predicting a 3 as it comes on shore from Morehead City down to maybe near Wilmington. That is very unlikely to change, not by more than 30, 40 miles. Maybe it's up to Morehead City, maybe it's down to Myrtle Beach, but as it gets very, very close to the coastline, it's almost definitely going to be in this general area. The real question becomes, where does it go after that? Again, if you're just tuning in, some of the major computer models stall it out. We were saying, a slow meandering movement or maybe a stall once it got inland. Now it's looking like maybe a stall near the coast and then heading south. That would help us in some respects, and it would hurt us in some respects. More on that coming up. Where it would hurt us potentially would be with the tides. Where it would help us would be with the heavy rainfall and the freshwater flooding. Wouldn't matter a whole lot with the peak winds. They would still be about the same. I think they're going to end up having to move. I know they're going to have to move these eventually. Question is, when will they do it with their predicted positions at day 4 and day 5? So the flood threats, rainfall flooding is still a concern here, but no more than a typical thunderstorm that would dump maybe 4, 5, 6 inches of rain in a short period of time. The heaviest threat and the heaviest rain is very, very likely to stay south and or west of us. Storm surge predictions range from 4 feet, which is nuisance flooding, up to just about exactly like Isabel was. We think it'll be in between those two numbers, but it really depends on how long it sits near Wilmington. If it moves inland and weakens into a tropical storm quickly, like the official forecast, we would be about 5.5 maybe. If instead it sits offshore and then drifts south, even though drifting south takes it away from us, the winds would be stronger with the overall storm, so we could get up to 6, 6.5 feet, or who knows even at that point. We'd have to see how strong the winds were and how long it lasted. So a lot still to be concerned about with this storm. We'll have more, and the very latest is all coming up.
All right, is all of this news about Hurricane Florence stressing you out? Next, how you can get that anxiety under control.
Well, it's on the internet, but is it true that hurricanes are getting stronger every year? We verify after this. Earlier this year, a study claimed hurricanes are getting stronger than ever.
The American Geophysical Union found the storms are strengthening at a faster pace than 30 years ago. Meteorologist Tim Panjagis set out to verify their claim.
Let's look at last season when Harvey, Irma, Jose, and Maria, all major hurricanes, rapidly intensified. What does that mean? By definition, to be called a rapidly intensifying system, the storm must increase its maximum wind speed by at least 29 miles per hour in 24 hours, as well as decrease its minimum central pressure by at least 24 millibars in a 24-hour period. So what is the root behind this recent growth in stronger hurricanes? According to the study, it appears to be a natural climate phenomenon that warms the oceans where hurricanes typically form. It is called the Atlantic Multidecadal Oscillation, or AMO. This controls the temperature of the North Atlantic between warm and cold. And since the 1990s, this cycle has been dominated by the warm phase, leading to much more fuel available for developing tropical systems. It is important to point out that the study shows rapid intensification of storms isn't happening more often, but when it does happen, the storms that do rapidly strengthen do so at a faster pace and get stronger. The study also says that it cannot rule out the role of man-made climate change in this recent discovery. Tim Panjagis, 13 News Now.
Team coverage of the hurricane threat picks up next. We are live from Portsmouth with an update. Plus, log on to 13newsnow.com for more tools to help you get ready for the storm.
Mic check 1 2 3 4 5. This is Chinu in Portsmouth. Mic check 1 2 3 4 5.
13 News Now is in storm mode as we continue to track a monster storm. Hurricane Florence takes aim at the East Coast.
Live now to Duck, North Carolina. North Carolina's governor giving the order, get out while you can.
Back here in Hampton Roads, preparations are in full swing. Storage shelves empty, gas stations busy, and more than 1 million people are under a tropical storm watch. We are in storm mode. Thanks for joining us in this special coverage. I'm Regina Mobley.
And I'm David Allen. Virginia and the Carolinas remain under states of emergency. Our weather technology is made for situations like this to bring you an accurate idea of what you and your family can expect over these next few days.
That's right. Our team is ready to bring you whatever Florence brings. We're keeping you covered from the oceanfront to the Outer Banks.
For the latest in what's happening right now, we begin with Chief Meteorologist Jeff Lawson.
And first of all, I need to correct something I said earlier. I've been talking about this sort of salmon-colored area over Virginia. I think I once or twice said it was a tropical storm warning. That is actually a tropical storm watch. That means tropical storm conditions are possible, not that they're likely. A watch means they're likely. A watch means they're possible. A warning means they are likely. So tropical storm force conditions are possible in our area. This is also a watch. We've been saying that's a hurricane watch, and it is until Friday, meaning hurricane conditions are possible for our northeast North Carolina counties. Now, for the Outer Banks, down south of the Albemarle Sound, that is a warning. That means hurricane conditions are likely to be occurring within a 72-hour period, if not sooner. Here, of course, is Tropical Storm Florence, at one point now a hurricane and now a very significant Category 4 hurricane. So it actually went from tropical storm to Category 4 instantly almost, then back to tropical storm in a few hours, and then back to a Category 4 again pretty darn quickly. Here it is. Talked a little bit about some of this dry air getting in there. Maybe that can keep it from intensifying, at least in the short term, a ton. But we do still expect it to undergo a little fluctuation here and there with the eye wall replacement. As the eye wall spins and gets too small, it goes away and a new one forms. They fluctuate 10 or 15 miles per hour when that happens. But anyway, still be a strong Category 4. It could even make a 5 theoretically. Not too much of a difference would push it up into that category, and then be sitting pretty close to the coastline as a Cat 4 Thursday afternoon. Notice the difference, though, between how far it went from Wednesday, Thursday to Thursday, Friday, really slowing up as high pressure builds in over areas in the Ohio Valley. It's just going to stop it from moving in that direction. And then depending on exactly where the high builds in, if it builds in and moves across to New York, it would slide east. If it stays over the Ohio Valley and really builds, it would shove this thing down the coastline. And that's what some of the significant computer models are beginning to show. That's why they have really moved this a little south and west and slowed it down, because a lot of the computers have day 4 right here, exactly where day 3 is located, and then they have day 5 down here. So that's why they've started to move that position there for day 5. Here's what we know. An East Coast landfall is very likely as a major hurricane. It's looking more and more like North Carolina, South Carolina, and that it could stay near the coast. That would mean the life-threatening rains would stay southwest of us, but it would still cause a problem around here with the tides, and I'm going to talk more about that right now. Here is the Euro model, brings it up, and then straight down to the south. The Euro consensus has it a little bit inland. Big difference in those two. If we can get it inland and do that, we can get it to weaken. That would be really great news for us. Wouldn't change the tropical storm force winds. Our peak winds would still be in the tropical storm force strength category. They would just last longer if it stalls at the coast. So rainfall flooding wouldn't be a huge deal here. Peak winds would be similar in either case. The peak winds, but not the duration. The tides would end up being higher in this new scenario because of tropical storm winds lasting longer. So that's something we're really going to have to monitor. I'll have a lot more information coming up.
Jeff, thanks. As we continue to track Hurricane Florence, we have crews on the Outer Banks, in Virginia Beach, and in Portsmouth tonight.
Portsmouth is opening garages and closing city offices and opening shelters to help residents prepare for the possibility of severe weather.
13 News Now reporter Chanu Hur is live for us in Portsmouth tonight. And Chanu, how is the weather out there right now?
Well, David, the weather for the most part tonight has been pretty quiet, no rain, and it's been pretty warm, which residents say it's pretty much perfect weather. But Mayor John Rowe told me earlier that doesn't mean people shouldn't be prepared for this oncoming storm. Matter of fact, the city is using a lot of resources to make sure people who live here are safe when this storm hits tomorrow or on Thursday. Zone A, which the governor has asked to evacuate, includes Old Town, but Mayor Rowe says he urges people all over the city, despite what zone you live in, to take the threats of this hurricane very seriously. People who live in Old Town are split right now. Some say they're not leaving, while others say they are definitely getting out of here.
I am nervous, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that it'll go, the other way, that we'll get less of it, everything.
Now, Mayor Rowe told me earlier that if you're looking to get your car to higher ground, all 4 garages downtown are open right now and free for residents to put their cars there. As far as shelters go, tomorrow starting at 1 o'clock, there will be 3 shelters open around the city. I have a list of all those shelters on my Facebook page that you can check out. Live in Portsmouth, Shnuher, 13 News Now.
Back now with a quick word on dealing with storm anxiety. Experts say that tightness in your chest and gut is normal during times like this, but there are steps you can take to reduce that anxiety.
See, the problem is that we believe that we're in control. And so the storms and stuff remind us that we are not really in control of anything. Make sure that you know that your home is prepared. Make sure you have your supplies.
Experts also say it's okay to talk it over with your loved ones or anyone who can offer help. Live now to the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. Zone A evacuation started this morning. That order was given to nearly 250,000 people across Hampton Roads. VDOT says there will be no lane reversal of the eastbound lanes at I-64. But a plan is in place if that becomes necessary. Now, in that event, no traffic would be allowed to travel toward Hampton Roads. All lanes would be used to carry traffic away from the region. There would be only 2 exits that will remain open: Williamsburg for gas, food, and hotels, and Bottoms Bridge near Richmond. Only the governor can issue the order for a lane reversal.
Colleges and universities across Virginia are making the call to cancel classes. Now many students are deciding to leave as Hurricane Florence gets closer to making landfall. Hampton University student Jamie Racer is from Maryland. When the school sent out a weather advisory yesterday, Racer's aunt in Richmond quickly came down to get her.
Tried to get in touch with anybody I could to find a way to get out of the area, because I know my school floods pretty badly on a regular basis when it rains.
All right, schools like Hampton, ODU, Norfolk State, and Christopher Newport are canceling classes for the rest of the week. Other colleges and universities are encouraging the community to stay updated through social media.
With Florence's current path, homeowners along the Rappahannock River could see a storm surge anywhere from 3 to 5 feet. The area is already dealing with a coastal flood warning and roads covered in water during high tide. Evacuations are in effect, and several communities in the northern neck are in that danger zone. Even so, many homeowners say they're staying put.
You leave your property, it's vulnerable to nature. Unless you stay here and watch it, take care of things, you can expect a lot more damage, and that's what we decided to do.
People choosing to stay are testing their generators and securing items around their homes. Many living on the river say they are concerned about their boats. Some are considering moving their boats to creeks or dry land.
Now, if you're evacuating, expect traffic. You want to make sure you take the route that makes the most sense based on where you're leaving from and where you're going. 13 News Now anchor Christina Robinson explains what you need to know.
There are several evacuation routes that VDOT has available to you, and a big one for our area is I-64. Whether you're traveling through Virginia Beach, Norfolk, or on the peninsula, that goes all up to Williamsburg. Now, let's say you're heading out through the Virginia Beach area, I-264, an obvious route there through the downtown tunnel and eventually making your way onto US 58 through Suffolk. That also is considered an evacuation route. Now, here's an important point I want to point out to you. The Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, according to VDOT, is not an evacuation route. That's an area that is known to be shut down because of winds, so VDOT encourages you not to take the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. In the studio, Christina Robinson, 13 News Now.
Make sure you are ready to go as soon as officials give the go-ahead. Before leaving, make sure your home is secured and remove any household chemicals from under the sink. Those chemicals can become toxic when they are mixed with floodwaters. Double check your emergency kit. You should have food and water, enough cash for a few days, and any critical documents. Also, top off your tank. Once you're on the road, you could be sitting in traffic for a while.
All right, Jeff is updating his full forecast when 13 News Now returns in storm mode.
Mic check 1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, well, good afternoon. I've been here so long, it seems like it. Good evening. We're talking about, again, a lot of action in the tropics. That's the main concern right now. If you're watching from some of the northern areas, you're seeing some flashes of light. Don't worry, those storms are not headed toward us. They are bringing flooding to Richmond. That's bad news, but they are headed slowly to the north. So the big news, the tropics. Tropical storm watch means conditions are possible here to deteriorate by Friday to some winds of over 40 miles per hour. Sustained. We're confident we're going to get gusts at least that high, but sustained winds still a little bit iffy, but that's the call right now, so we're in a watch. This is a hurricane watch, meaning possibly some sustained winds of hurricane force, but it's not as likely as it is in this purple area from the Albemarle Sound south, Wright Brothers Memorial Bridge, to the south, a hurricane warning for Friday. This is likely to become Joyce I think I misspoke earlier as well when I said that Isaac was going to head up here into the central Atlantic. Isaac's the one that's going to head over toward the Caribbean. Helene is going to get caught by this front and move to the north. But again, Florence is the big concern right now. That is the one that is headed due northwest or west-northwest and eventually going to come almost to a complete halt. The question is exactly where does that happen? Currently, it's at 140 miles per hour winds sustained, and that means, again, for more than a minute or two, with the gust, might only be 20 seconds, but you still have gusts to 165. Look at the daily. So from one day to the next, one day to the next. So extrapolate out, and by what? Friday, it should be somewhere up here over West Virginia, right? Where is it by Friday? Look at that. Incredibly slow movement as it gets toward the coastline because that high pressure is blocking it up over the Ohio Valley. Whether that then moves to New York or Cape Cod or where that high moves will depend on where this storm goes, combined with the system developing down in the Caribbean. So again, at that point, it's 104 miles offshore. A day later, it comes here right about onshore. We're very confident it's going to be somewhere within 30, 40 miles of Wilmington, whether it even never makes landfall at Wilmington and then heads south. But you notice the next day, only 59 miles. So we're going to be watching this thing continue, I think, to get shifted slower and or back inland, because that's the way most of the models are trending. And it has been a trend for a while now. Last night, they briefly moved a few, literally like 20 miles north, but that was one movement. The rest of them now are hundreds of miles moving the other direction. So what do we know? An East Coast landfall is likely, and likely as a major hurricane. It's looking more and more, though, like it's going to be North Carolina / South Carolina that'll have the biggest impacts. We will still have impacts here. That's especially if it stays near the coast, which it's looking like it might do. The life-threatening rains, I'm talking 20, 30-inch rains, would stay south and west of us. So we could still have some problems with rainfall, but again, not nearly to the extent of areas south of us. Here is the ensemble as well as the one-time run of the best model out there, the Euro, and it brings it to around Wilmington and then takes it southwest down here to around Charleston before bringing it in, and then it gets caught ahead of a cold front as the high finally moves offshore. That, again, is a little bit different than yesterday, but still, it's starting to match some of the other things that we're seeing. Here is the probability of tropical storm force sustained winds. That's 100, so 90, 80, 70, 80% chance around here. That's the peak wind. That's not really going to change if the storm drifts inland and weakens rapidly or if it drifts to the south. What'll shift is how long those winds last, which will then change this up. So if it stalls and doesn't get inland and weaken, the rainfall, at least the flooding anyway, would not be a huge deal around here. We'd have some flooding from freshwater, but nothing major. Peak winds would be similar to a move inland. That's not going to change, but the tides would be higher because the tropical storm winds would last for longer. So Evan's going to give us a little more information now on that.
That's right, Jeff. And the big concern is if the storm just lingers off the North Carolina, South Carolina coast for a couple of days, we'll have continued easterly winds, which, as you know, that piles up the water, and we could see those tide levels coming up and up as we get through the weekend. Just to give you some historic tide levels at Sewell's Point as reference, the big one, you might have seen the pictures in downtown Norfolk of the men in boats in 1933. That's when the tide level hit the highest at 8.02 feet. Isabel hit 7.89, so not far from the big 1933 hurricane, and Irene back in 2011 hit 7.56 feet. Now, this official forecast only goes through Friday, so if the storm stalls a little bit longer into Saturday or Sunday, each successive tide level might be higher, and we could be talking about tide levels as we get into, say, Sunday and Monday that could be approaching 6 feet or maybe even a little bit higher. We'll get more of that information coming up over the next day or two. But again, we'll have to watch those tide levels. That's a little bit more of a growing concern as we get into the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not saying even if this shifts to the south that we are out of the woods, not by any stretch of the imagination. It would just shift the concern somewhat from one type freshwater flooding to maybe a little more of the tidal flooding. But that really depends on days 4 and 5. If it's still a Category 3 storm or even a 2 sitting east of Wilmington for 2 or 3 days, that's a lot different than if it's been 2 or 3 days inland and weakening to just a tropical depression. So that is the big concern right now. In some respects it would help, and in some respects it would hurt, but we will continue to monitor it because that would be a big deal, obviously for areas of South Carolina and North Carolina, which would get hit even harder than they were expecting already.
And that's a lot.
Yes, it is.
All right, thanks, Jeff.
Okay.
Well, do hotels have to accept your pets during an emergency?
We saw the post. Now we're verifying if it's true. Next, 13 News Now continues in storm mode when we return. Transportation officials are taking extra precautions ahead of Hurricane Florence. Right now, VDOT crews across the state are on standby. Overnight, they tested the floodgates at the Midtown Tunnel. Crews also tested the floodgates at the HRBT. And right now, crews are also preparing trucks and equipment. And joining me to talk more about all of this preparation is Bill Collier. Bill, thanks for being with us.
Certainly.
What's on your to-do list tomorrow morning?
More of the same, making sure staffing plans are set, our equipment's ready, all the equipment is tested and fueled up, ready to go. Crews are trained on the right equipment. They have the proper personal protective equipment. And then cleaning drains, cleaning areas that have clogged in the past, checking low-lying areas, cleaning any debris or vegetation that may cause problems in the future with the amount of rain we're expecting. And
the ferries.
And the ferries. One of the impacts tomorrow will be the stoppage of the Jamestown Scotland ferry. Right now, the Port of Virginia is expected to close the port tomorrow, so we will have to sortie those up to the Port of Richmond for safekeeping during the worst of the storm. So that is expected to happen tomorrow based on the current weather forecast.
The governor called for evacuation of Zone A. How did that go from your perspective?
As far as we know, it went well. The traffic did show an increase. We didn't have any major backups or incidents that stopped that. We did our best to stop all lane closures and any impedance to the evacuating traffic. We lifted some tolls where we could, so we think it went well.
As the storm moves through, what areas are you particularly focused on for public safety and to keep traffic flowing?
Well, the key concern is the low-lying areas, the areas where we have seen flooding in the past. We'll be watching, where the rainfall hits, where the heavy bands hit, and that changes from storm to storm, but that's the key. With our interstates, checking to make sure those drains are cleaned ahead of time does a great deal, but we also have to watch how the low-lying city streets are impacted and what that means for somebody who's coming down the interstate and down to the bottom of a ramp and all of a sudden hits a little bit more standing water. So we have to pay attention to that as well. In the counties, again, the areas that are either heavy vegetation, we've had quite a bit of rain over the summer, so we've got saturated soil. So, the little bit of wind could cause trees to come down. We'll be watching that. Certainly, power lines, the coordination we do with Dominion Energy and making sure we get trees and power lines cleared together. All things that we routinely think of, but it's once you go into battle mode, it's piece by piece, hit it all.
We hope the VDOT crews are safe out there, and good luck as we head through this storm together.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Concern about pets is one of the most common things we're seeing on social media conversations. We've seen some claims going around that it's illegal for hotels or shelters to turn away your dogs or cats. So we've had our Jason Puckett to verify if this is true. He joins us now with more.
Here's the post in question. It's been circling since Hurricanes Harvey and Irma last year, and it makes some distinct claims. It says if you're evacuating to a hotel and they won't let your pets in, tell them that's against the law created by FEMA after Hurricane Katrina. Then citing the Pets Evacuation and Transportation Standards Act for proof. And it's easy to see why this was shared so much. Pets are our family members. We want to take them with us and make sure they're safe when we evacuate. But is this claim true? Our sources are the Pets Act itself and FEMA. Dive into that act mentioned in the post and you will find that it requires government leaders to create emergency plans for pets, even create shelters in some circumstances. But it doesn't say anything about hotels or motels. And FEMA themselves have said that hotels and motels don't fall under that Pets Act. Now, hotels must accept service animals, but we can verify any claims that hotels and motels must legally accept your pets during evacuations are false. Now, FEMA does have a plan online for what to do with your pets during emergencies. Part of that includes looking up pet-friendly hotels in an area where you might evacuate before the storm hits. Now, folks, we're going to be verifying a lot more as Florence draws closer. If you have any questions, send us an email. With your Verify, I'm Jason Puckett. Back to you.
And still to come, we take you inside the facility that will keep us on the air no matter what. Plus, an update on conditions on the Outer Banks. 13 News Now continues in storm mode next.
Hello, how's it going? Can you hear? Understandable. Sounds good. Mic check, yes. Well, walking along the beach today, saw a lot of crabs. You know what they're doing? They're burying themselves in the sand. They're hiding in their homes. Quite the opposite when it comes to...
"13 News Now" continues in storm mode as we monitor a really dangerous situation.
Hurricane Florence is turning off the coast. Its impact yet to be seen. Thanks for joining us. I'm Regina Mobley.
And I'm David Allen. The track has shifted, but Florence remains a dangerous hurricane. Chief Meteorologist Jeff Lawson is monitoring the latest for us. Jeff.
Yeah, and we have a lot to talk about. I've been posting a lot on Facebook and getting a number of comments. Some people saying, wait a minute, so you're saying if it moves south, it's not going to hit us. Don't tell people that. That is not what I'm saying. So if you've been watching, you know that. But if you're just joining us, let me break it down for you. Right now, we have this sort of salmon colored area, pink, whatever you want to call it. It is a tropical storm watch, and that is until Friday. That means it is possible we could have tropical storm force winds of sustained magnitude. We're certainly going to have them in gusts. Question is, will we have them sustained? All because of that storm. Then we have, again, right in here, that's a hurricane watch from the state line down to the Albemarle Sound and stops right at the Wright Brothers Memorial Bridge. That means hurricane conditions are possible. South of there, Nags Head, the rest of the Outer Banks, mainland there on to Turtle County, Washington County. That means that it is likely we will see some hurricane force winds down there. Been talking about it for a couple of days, how this storm would run into an area of high pressure and that would start to slow it up and block it. What's new is this is likely to become Joyce within 5 days. The interaction between those two is, I think, going to play a role in what happens. It'll also affect how strong the high is, which will then influence the path. So a combination of different effects on what is going to steer this storm eventually. I liken it to if you put a top on a table, it'll spin around, a dreidel, whatever you want to call the different ones you can put. They will just sort of move around unless somebody blows on them and gets them to move to the other side of the table. That's what hurricanes are. Hurricanes can't have much wind blowing them anywhere or they wouldn't form. So very light winds and very slow movement. So as a result, that just shows that without anything to steer them, they can do whatever they want, especially as they get toward high pressure. So by Thursday, 140-mile-per-hour winds, not that far offshore. It has started to slow up and slow up in a big-time fashion. So by Friday afternoon, it is right near the coastline as a Category 3. And then Saturday afternoon, it's only a few more miles inland as a tropical storm. and then weakening down to a tropical depression. If that happens, we will have the low end of some of the various reports you might have seen with flooding. We would have some tidal flooding. However, if the other computers are right, and I'm going to show you one in a minute, if this day 4 position is right here still as a day 4 position where day 3 was, and it's a category even 1 or 2, and then it drifts to the southwest, we would be out of the woods in some of the effects, especially the really serious wind and the devastating, just absolutely life-threatening flooding, but we would still have to worry about the tides because the peak tide or the peak wind would be the same. It's just going to last a couple days longer because it wouldn't be inland and weakening. This is the new GFS model, almost identical to the European model, brings it in right there, brushes the landfall, and then circles it back down the South Carolina coast to near Charleston. If that happens, we will have significant rain, but only 2 to 6 inches, depending on your exact location, and the really heavy stuff would stay down to the south. How much? Well, you can see down here in the pink, sort of purple area, 15 to 30 inches on down all the way into South Carolina. The European model, almost identical forecast. So these are both very different than the official forecast at this point. If they see this for another run or two, they'll start moving the official forecast this way. And I think they're probably going to end up doing that. But that calls for 30 to 40 inches of rain down to the south. So again, would help us in some respects like this, but it would hurt us in others. We'll talk about that when I return.
Jeff, thanks. Neighbors in parts of Dare and Currituck counties are being ordered to leave.
That's right, but the decision to leave isn't so easy. Some people fear they won't be able to get back onto Hatteras Island after the storm. 13 News Now was there as crews prepped NC 12. They're working to prevent overwash on the highway.
It is a critical link for those trying to leave the Outer Banks. Tonight, many people are still weighing the decision to stay or go.
13 News Now reporter Robert Boyd is live from Jeanette's Pier with the latest.
Well, Regina and David, as I was walking along the beach today, I saw a lot of crabs. And you know what those crabs were doing? They were digging themselves in the sand, hiding in their homes. Well, that's not what a lot of vacationers were doing. The exact opposite. They were coming out of the rental properties. They were up and down the beach, having a great old time. And I asked a lot of these folks, aren't you worried about the evacuation? Aren't you worried about the hurricane? And a lot of these tourists said no. They felt they had plenty of time to get out before things got bad. Now, in particular, we saw one family from Buffalo, New York. They were outside playing cornhole, barbecuing chicken, drinking beer. And they said they thought the evacuation was about a day too early and decided they won't leave until Wednesday afternoon. Now, they said they just arrived on Sunday and were supposed to be here a whole week. So they're pretty disappointed that the vacation is going to be cut short, but at least they did buy insurance.
No one thought it was going to hit here. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, the house was rocking, and I looked out in the parking lot, and there was whitecaps on the parking lot. There was so much water flooded in here.
Now, again, the vacationer we spoke with said that they were basically felt that they paid the money and they took a whole 10 days of work off to come from Buffalo, so they were going to stay as long as they possibly could. Now, coming up tonight at 11 o'clock, we're going to hear a lot more from vacationers as well as locals and why the locals say that the tourists need to get out, and also what the tourists are doing when it comes to hunkering down, preparing for Florence. Live in Nags Head, Robert Boyd, 13 News Now.
The rush to get ready for the storm has put a squeeze on supplies at local stores. We stopped by the Harris Teeter near the Virginia Beach oceanfront. Stores are trying to keep stock, but water, milk, and bread are flying off the shelves.
I'm stocking up. The storm's on its way. So I'm going to make sure that I'm properly prepared.
Because I don't want to come out here in the pouring down rain.
If you are grabbing essentials, remember to get some cash. If we deal with power outages, you may not be able to use an ATM or credit card. Let's take a look at the other things you need in a storm. Number one, have a list.
Number one, have a list of supplies ready to go. And think primitive, like you're going camping. Battery-powered items, manual everything, non-perishable food, water, and don't forget to have cash on hand. You can do this right now before any hurricanes are on the way. And number two, before a storm gets here, fill up your gas tank in case you need to evacuate. You don't want to be stuck if gas stations get overwhelmed or start running out of fuel. And speaking of evacuation, number 3, know your evacuation route if you're in a storm surge area. This goes along with knowing your zone. If you need to learn more about that, we have a link on our website, 13newsnow.com. And lastly, number 4, of course, stay informed. Since storms can develop and make landfall quickly, and sometimes storms go from no big deal to incredibly dangerous in just a few days.
We could see very high storm surge even without a direct hit. Now here's a look at what that would mean. A storm surge around 5 to 7 feet. Well, that would send water into homes and businesses. When that gets up to 7 to 12 feet, that's enough to fill the first floor of a building. 12 to 15 feet puts homes underwater, and when you get all the way up to 20 feet, the storm surge could just overwhelm entire cities. Looking over to Portsmouth, the city also opened garages. You can use County, Harbor Middle, and Water Street garages until after the storm. Live look now in Norfolk. The city has opened garages there to help people protect their cars. The list is on your screen, but I can tell you that it includes many downtown options and garages as well at Old Dominion University. All right. Check out Virginia Beach Town Center. Some of the garages in Town Center will be open to residents tomorrow. You can also park in the 9th Street and 30th Street municipal garages in the resort area. Right, next we go inside the tool that can help you keep informed no matter what Mother Nature throws at us.
That's right. 13 News Now is dedicated to keeping you and your loved ones safe. And we'll be right back. "13 News Now is dedicated to keeping you and your loved ones safe.
That's why we have a backup facility ready should we need to evacuate where we are. 13 News Now reporter Laura Geller is there with an inside look.
We are here at our backup facility in this Driver neighborhood of Suffolk. Here we have a studio, a weather center, and a control room. We are, of course, consistently monitoring the situation. We are keeping in touch with state police and the governor's office and emergency managers to make sure that we are safe while also making sure we can still bring you the latest information. So let's take a look around. Here we have our weather center. This is where our meteorologists would be working. They've got the same weather widgets and technology and tools so that they can forecast this storm for you from here. And over here, this is our little mini set where our anchors can plug in to get you everything you need to know. We're going to take a walk this way. Back here is our control room. This area in the back is where our newscast producers and directors run our shows smoothly, and they've got all the equipment here. And joining me right now is 13 News Now Director of Technology, Keith O'Malley. He has been here setting up for quite a bit of time now to make sure that we can do things. And Keith, can you compare for me our studios in Norfolk versus our facility here?
This facility here is basically just a scaled down version of what we have in our studio in Norfolk. Everything, we have all the same capabilities, it's just not quite as large.
So what are we doing to prepare so we can make sure that we can broadcast from this facility?
We've been testing all the equipment for days now, making sure everything's working. We've brought our crews out here, we brought our producers, our talent out here, give them a chance to familiarize themselves with it, just to make sure that we can broadcast to the public when we need to.
And what kinds of things go into the decision making to move here?
We're going to decide to move when we feel that the flooding has reached a point where we can't stay where we're at. We're going to make sure that our people's safety is most important.
So as Keith mentioned, we have been doing mock newscasts, doing show run-throughs to make sure that everything is running smoothly. So if we do need to make that transition from our Norfolk studios to here in Suffolk, we can do so smoothly and quickly, and we are always going to be able to bring you the latest information. For now, we are in Suffolk. Laura Geller, 13 News Now.
Right, and here's Jeff now with the latest on Florence.
All right, a lot of different colors on this map. Of course, the colors from the rainfall showing up out in Central Virginia, including a flood advisory right now near Richmond. They've had extremely heavy rainfall with that line of showers and storms I was tracking during the earlier broadcast. That moved to the north, so low rain chances around here tonight. This, though, this includes from Poquoson down through Hampton and then continues on down to the south side. Anything west of Suffolk, you're not in the warning or watch, but east of there you are, right down to the state line. So Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, Norfolk, Portsmouth, for example, on the south side in a tropical storm watch, and that is until Friday afternoon. South of there, down through our northeast North Carolina counties, right to the Albemarle Sound, that's where we're talking about a watch for a hurricane. That means conditions are possible that we could have a hurricane south of the Albemarle Sound. Hurricane warning until Friday, all because of this. This is Hurricane Florence. It's gone from a tropical storm almost incredibly rapidly up to a Category 4, just as rapidly down to a tropical storm, and then just as rapidly back to a Category 4. I have not seen a swing like that in that short a time frame as we saw with this storm. I've been doing this about 35 years now, including working for a while for the Hurricane Center, or a sort of a branch of that actually. And you can see by Thursday afternoon, it's supposed to be offshore as a Category 4. We're hoping some upwelling or some wind shear will knock it down to a 3 by the time it makes landfall or gets just about to land, because there's some indication it could stall right around as it brushes the land here near Wilmington or Morehead City on toward Camp Lejeune as a Category 3. After that, these are likely to change because all the computers are now slowing the system down and showing it getting shoved more to the south. They certainly could change. Nothing has trended north. All the northern models have trended to the middle, while the middle models have trended to the south. So that is really going to be a huge factor in what happens. This would be bad for North and South Carolina. It would be horrible then if that storm, instead of being there and there, ends up sort of drifting here near the coastline, because that would allow it to keep its winds going for a much longer period of time. And that's what the European model is now saying, as is the GFS, which I showed you earlier. It is saying, comes in here and then's like, whoop, I don't know where to go. It's holding me up. High pressure's holding me up. So it's likely, at least according to this, to start drifting southwest and make a second landfall down across areas of Charleston. Even though the storm would be heading away from us, that would be better in many aspects with the flooding rain, which I think is going to just be almost like Harvey was in Houston, unheard of numbers for the rainfall. It would help us for that, but it would hurt us a little bit because we'd have the tropical storm force winds lasting longer. So flooding is definitely a concern from rainfall, but the heaviest stuff would stay to the south. Storm surge predictions range from 4 feet above mean lower low water. That's a storm that comes in again near maybe Myrtle Beach and rapidly weakens to as high as Isabel-like numbers, about 7.8, 7.9, if the storm comes in more like Morehead City and then sits for 2 days before drifting to the south. That's why we cannot narrow that range just yet in terms of how bad the tidal flooding will be around here. In terms of the tropical storm force winds, very high chances. In terms of the hurricane winds, pretty low chances here, 10, 20, even for the Outer Banks, maybe only 30% of sustained hurricane force winds, while this is the tropical storm force category, and the odds of that are anywhere from 90 to 80 to 70, maybe even 60 to the north across the area. So if the storm stalls at the coast, rain flooding would not be a huge deal here. We'd have, sort of typical thunderstorm type flooding. The peak winds would be similar to if it moves inland and weakens or if it stays at the coast. The peak winds around here wouldn't change, but the duration would. They would last much longer because of the, again, longer time that it would sit down there over water versus weakening over land. So that would impact our tides and drive them up again to perhaps as high as Isabel. Right now, if the official forecast holds, it would be much lower than that, but that is what we're going to have to watch the next couple of days. Helps us some, hurts us in other ways.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Is all of the news about Hurricane Florence stressing you out? Next, how to get that anxiety under control.
And rumor has it hurricanes are getting stronger every year. Is this true? We verify right after this. Back now with a quick word on dealing with storm anxiety. The experts say that tightness in your chest and gut is normal during times like this, but there are steps you can take to reduce that anxiety.
See, the problem is that we believe that we're in control. And so the storms and stuff remind us that we are not really in control of anything. Make sure that you know that your home is prepared. Make sure you have your supplies.
The experts also say it's okay to talk it over with loved ones or anyone who can offer help. Well, earlier this year, a study claimed hurricanes are getting stronger than ever.
The American Geophysical Union found the storms are strengthening at a faster pace than 30 years ago. Meteorologist Tim Pantages set out to verify their claim.
Let's look at last season when Harvey, Irma, Jose, and Maria, all major hurricanes, rapidly intensified. What does that mean? By definition, to be called a rapidly intensifying system, the storm must increase its maximum wind speed by at least 29 miles per hour in 24 hours, as well as decrease its minimum central pressure by at least 24 millibars in a 24-hour period. So what is the root behind this recent growth in stronger hurricanes? According to the study, it appears to be a natural climate phenomenon that warms the oceans where hurricanes typically form. It is called the Atlantic Multidecadal Oscillation, or AMO. This controls the temperature of the North Atlantic between warm and cold. And since the 1990s, this cycle has been dominated by the warm phase, leading to much more fuel available for developing tropical systems. It is important to point out that the study shows rapid intensification of storms isn't happening more often, but when it does happen, the storms that do rapidly strengthen do so at a faster pace and get stronger. The study also says that it cannot rule out the role of man-made climate change in this recent discovery. Tim Pantages, 13 News Now.
And there's a lot of misinformation online. If you see something you want us to verify, reach out to us on Facebook or Twitter. You can also email us at verify@13newsnow.com.
13 News Now continues in storm mode when we come back.
Tonight in preparation for this storm, the city of Virginia Beach provided free stand at the Sportsplex this afternoon. Can you hear me now? Okay, thanks.
South of the border have a cam? I'm just wondering if it has a, if south of the border has like a.
I can't imagine they don't.
I went by that 50 years ago when I was a kid, my parents, and it looked rough then. I'm just wondering if they have like a camera, anything you could see what.
13 News Now is in storm mode as we continue to track a monster storm. Hurricane Florence takes aim at the East Coast.
Let's go live now to Duck, North Carolina. North Carolina's governor giving the order to get out while you can.
Back here in Hampton Roads, preparations are in full swing. Store shelves empty, gas stations very busy, and more than 1 million people are under a tropical storm watch. We are in storm mode. Thanks for joining us for our special coverage of Hurricane Florence. I'm Regina Mobley.
And I'm David Allen. Virginia and the Carolinas tonight remain under states of emergency. And our weather technology is made for situations just like this to bring you an accurate idea of what you and your family can expect over these next couple of days.
Our team is ready to bring you whatever Florence brings. We're keeping you covered from the Outer Banks to the Eastern Shore.
And for the latest on what's happening right now, we begin with Chief Meteorologist Jeff Lawson.
And I'm getting a lot of people on Facebook saying, so you don't know where it's going after like 3 days? We've been saying that forever. But we can tell you the trends. We can tell you what we do know. These storms, especially when there's a high blocking them, look at some of the ones like Sandy and how it did a loop and came back. Hurricanes go wherever they want to. All we can do is tell you what the latest indications are. So right now, that's why we have the pink shaded area here for coastal Virginia, Hampton Roads, from Poquoson on to the south, actually from Mob Jack Bay down to the south on the Middle Peninsula, all the way to the state line. A tropical storm warning. That means tropical storm conditions are possible by Friday. Then hurricane conditions are possible in this next band, including Elizabeth City and northeast North Carolina. South of that, Nags Head south, that's where hurricane warnings are in effect, meaning hurricane conditions are likely, not guaranteed, but likely. As you can see, the storm is sitting out here between all sorts of other storms. There's Helene, there's Isaac, there's a cold front. There's what's likely to be Joyce. Then we have high pressure that's starting to form out in the Ohio Valley. How strong that gets and how strong this low is will determine exactly what happens with this hurricane. It's still 700 and some miles away and 4-5 days away from the type of predictions that we would need to make to be able to pin down exactly what's going to happen here. So right now, we can tell you what we do know. It's a dangerous storm. 140-mile-per-hour winds, gust to 165. That's Category 4. It is very likely to continue to intensify, certainly not weaken much as it gets over the next couple of days. Notice how it slows down, though, from there to there, and then it increases. And now watch, all of a sudden, these are all 24-hour time frames. Whoop, compress that all because it doesn't move very much. Friday, late in the day, afternoon, it starts to come on shore. We're it'll at least get close to shore by Friday afternoon. Then the indications are it could start to drift, it could slow up. It's not going to come north at that point. It could do something funky and then eventually come to the north maybe, but at this point it is very, very likely to either drift around or maybe even head to the south. We'll have to wait if the evening computer runs verify what the afternoon runs are doing because they have it nowhere near here. There are one or two. Most of them now take it down here either into North Carolina or down the coast. Big difference if it comes inland and like this, maybe 50 miles inland would be a huge difference over 50 miles offshore heading south and west. Inland, the storm would die and the winds would die. Near the coastline would allow it to keep its winds, and that would bring us a lot more tidal flooding, even though the storm was heading away. I showed the Euro the last time and how it took it to the south and back in. Now the GFS, the American model, does the same thing. Identical runs of two of our models, and the Euro, of course, is the best one. GFS rainfall matches pretty nicely, as you would expect, then with the Euro rainfall calling for 15 to 30-inch rain amounts down across the Carolina coastline. That would just cause devastating flooding. Here's the Euro calling for even more, 30 to 40-inch rain amounts. I think the highest I saw was a 37, but that's just incredible amounts. So if it stalls, near the South Carolina coast, our rainfall flooding would not be a huge deal. It would be not that far south of us, out of our viewing area typically, or maybe some of our northeast North Carolina counties, but peak winds would be similar no matter what path it takes, if it moves inland and weakens, or if it stays near the coast and continues to stay very strong storm. Our peak winds wouldn't matter because it's going to be far enough away that we'll have that tropical storm force strength wind around here. The big difference would be the tropical storm force winds would last a little longer. That's why we can't tell you how high the tides will be 4 to 5 days from now, because a difference of 100 miles where that storm drifts, either offshore or inland, would make a massive difference in how much flooding we get. So it is still going to have some major effects around here. The tides could even go higher than you might be hearing in some places, but we'll bear that all out over the next couple of days.
All right, thanks, Jeff.
Our live storm road coverage continues for you in Virginia Beach.
That's right. We found a pretty quiet ocean front today. The city gave away free sand to anyone who needs it to fill up their own sandbags.
Around a ton of sand was dumped at the Sportsplex earlier today. Now, as night falls, residents are preparing for Florence.
13 News Now reporter Megan Purrier joins us live with the work being done right now.
David, Regina, the preparation is still ongoing tonight. We just saw a few minutes ago, actually, some trucks pull up and pull some sandbags out and put them up against some businesses here in town center. Now, the city of Virginia Beach provided free sand at the Sportsplex earlier this afternoon, but that sand is just one step in this process. The city says if you can get out now, then you should. But first and foremost, they ask that if you're in Zone A, you should evacuate by tomorrow. Now, if you're planning on bunkering down, city officials say you can always call 311 if you need help or transportation. The city will have buses for those in need that will run 24/7, and once winds get too strong, those buses will have to stop. Toby Snyder was at the Sportsplex this afternoon getting sand and prepping to stay out for the storm.
We've got wood at the house. If the path changes, we'll put the wood up. If not, we'll return the wood. We've got the sandbags over the weekend. Beefaroni, hold the kids over, cereal, jerky, water. Yeah, we made sure we went out on Saturday and hit BJ's. We knew last week that this was coming.
Stay with us on 13 News Now at 11 as we bring you more on where to get supplies and shelter if this storm hits us. Live in Virginia Beach, I'm Megan Purrier, 13 News Now.
Thank you, Megan. Nighttime over Ocracoke as we look live. Time is running out to evacuate. Ferry service will be suspended starting tomorrow morning. NCDOT says nearly 900 cars and 1,600 people have been carried off the island.
Right now, HRT is getting ready to roll back service. Listen closely if you rely on public transportation. Starting tomorrow, light rail and ferries will be suspended. Thursday, buses will stop rolling if Florence becomes a problem. We're told service could be stopped through the weekend. Now, flights in and out of Hampton Roads are expected to be affected as well. We're starting to see the first round of cancellations at Norfolk International Airport. Some airlines are waiving fees if you need to change your plans. That includes the following airlines: Allegiant, American, Delta, Frontier, Southwest, and United. JetBlue caps fares on flights to and from Richmond International Airport. They're limiting the cost to $149. The airline is also capping fares on flights in and out of Savannah, Charleston, Charlotte, and Raleigh. And the city of Chesapeake is suspending tolls on the Chesapeake Expressway. That is because people have been ordered to evacuate from the city and parts of North Carolina. The toll on the highway will be suspended until further notice. We will let you know when it goes into effect once again.
All right, check this out. Pretty cool video here. Brand new video, in fact, of a hurricane hunter flying through Hurricane Florence. NOAA just released this video of today's flight aboard the Air Force Reserve plane. The aircraft is packed with sensors to gather data on the storm.
Now, the National Hurricane Center made some changes this year to help improve communication with the public. First, the adjustments to the hurricane track map. The cone of uncertainty is smaller to give the public a better idea of where the center of the storm is going. Experimental wind maps are also now official. These help show when strong winds will arrive at a given location. And finally, advisories now include potential impacts further in advance.
Aircraft from Langley Air Force Base are flying out of harm's way. It comes as the last Navy ships leave Hampton Roads. This is new video of some of the jets landing in Ohio. Air Force F-22 Raptor fighter jets relocated to Rickenbacker Air Force Base, National Guard base, I should say. This isn't the first time jets from Langley have visited the base. The F-22 Raptors also went to Rickenbacker during Hurricane Matthew. Tomorrow, the Coast Guard is expected to update us on their plan for Florence. They are also expected to close the main shipping channel in and out of Hampton Roads. Right now, the Coast Guard put the region's harbors under port condition X-ray. That means large cargo ships are either preparing to leave or have permission to remain in port.
President Trump is declaring states of emergency for Virginia and the Carolinas. The president was briefed by the head of FEMA today. He says the federal government is ready to respond to Florence. FEMA leaders warn the storm will be a devastating event. Here's another look at Hurricane Florence. We're expecting new data when the National Hurricane Center releases their next advisory. That is coming up at 11 o'clock tonight.
Jeff is updating us on his full forecast when 13 News Now returns in storm.
Making sure your home is safe and secure before a hurricane hits is important. The Department of Homeland Security says there are 6 things to know before a disaster strikes. Know where shutoff valves are for your gas and electricity. Make a plan with your family, knowing where to go and what to do and how to reunite. Double check your insurance policy. Plan for your pets by checking for pet-friendly shelters. And finally, know your evacuation routes.
As we prepare to potentially feel some effects from Hurricane Florence, volunteer groups are ready to respond to any area the storm will impact.
That's right. Operation Blessing is getting ready to help either in Hampton Roads or farther south in the Carolinas.
Our coverage now takes us to Chesapeake, where those efforts are underway. Here's 13 News Now reporter Adriana de Alba.
It's been a busy day at Operation Blessing. Relief crews are preparing for Hurricane Florence to make landfall along the East Coast. Today's mission, making sure 900 emergency food bags get delivered from its headquarters warehouse to YMCA locations by the end of this evening.
We wanted to make sure that we delivered the food as soon as possible. We don't want to wait to the last minute where folks are rushing. We just want to get it in their hands.
All day long, crews loaded pallets of emergency food bags onto trucks. One young volunteer, Camila Wallace, is making sure the right food gets into people's hands.
This is rice cake, so I think they'll love this.
She and her parents volunteer to pack these food bags every Monday. But as we anticipate this week's storm, she's doing overtime.
Well, I don't really know how much I come here, but I'll say it's a lot of days.
On top of distributing food, Operation Blessing is also setting up 2 disaster relief locations, one in the Virginia Beach area, the other in southeastern Virginia or North Carolina. That location is not yet determined. It all depends on where the storm is expected to hit the hardest.
Operation Blessing stands ready. This is our mission. We look forward to helping individuals in need.
Locally, all of the relief equipment is ready to go. That includes a mobile kitchen prepared to feed 2,500 meals a day and a mobile command center, a power generator, shower trailers, and volunteer supplies like tools to repair homes.
Now, right now, disaster relief leaders are watching the storm closely to help them determine which area will be hit hardest and where they will be needed the most.
Saturday's Virginia Tech football game is called off because of Hurricane Florence. A short time ago, East Carolina University released a statement. It said the football team would not be traveling to Blacksburg. They're worried about the storm and want to make sure that their players are safe. ECU officials say they're hoping to reschedule that game with Tech at a later date.
All right, let's check in now with Jeff for the forecast.
All right, well, you can see all these different colors out here. We have some coastal flood advisories for another couple of hours as we approach high tide. This sort of pinkish area, salmon color, whatever you want to call it, coral, it is talking about from Poquoson back down through Hampton and then south side, Norfolk, Portsmouth, Virginia Beach, and Chesapeake. That is a tropical storm watch, not a warning, tropical storm watch. I said earlier a couple of times warning. It's actually a watch. That means conditions are possible that they could deteriorate to winds of sustained over 40 miles per hour. We're certainly likely to get at least that in gusts. And that's going to be a big deal, whether we get 40 mile per hour gusts or whether we get 60 mile per hour gusts. 60 mile per hour gusts, we'd have a lot trees down, just like Isabel. 40 mile per hour gusts, we'd probably have far fewer. So that's something we're going to watch. South in this sort of orange area, that from the state line all the way down to the Wright Brothers Memorial Bridge is a hurricane watch, means hurricane conditions, winds over 74 are possible. And then from Nags Head south, a hurricane warning means that it's likely you'll have some at least a gust to hurricane force and even sustained winds. Here's the storm, well defined, sitting out there, one of a string of storms that came off Africa. 4 already have come off Africa and formed. Gordon died out. That's Isaac and that's Helene way over there. This is likely to become Joyce in the next few days as the storm drifts to the northwest. It's moving at a pretty good clip. It's going to increase in its speed in the short term for the next day or two, and then it's really going to slow down as it gets into the Thursday, Friday time frame, even Saturday. We've been saying for days now, whether it drifted up into Danville or drifted over toward Asheville or wherever, it wasn't going to move very far, and that would determine who got the heaviest rain. Well, it's still going to be the case as the storm doesn't show much of a movement over an entire day here in extreme southeastern areas of North Carolina. I have a feeling they're going to be moving this and maybe moving it considerably. Certainly, if the models continue to show a straight south movement across the coastline, they will do that. That's after day 3. Through Friday, this is a very narrow cone. The cone continues about in here for Friday. You say, well, no, I see it out here. That's for Saturday, because Saturday it could then head in either direction, but it's looking more and more like it might try to trend to the south. Here are the two sort of major models, if you will. The GFS in yellow, that's the American model, the Euro model in red, and they are literally on top of each other through day 3 into starting day 4. And then they both start to move it down the coast. A little bit different speed, but they both take it down the coast and then back in around Charleston, and then both end up out here somewhere near the western tip of Virginia or on into the Ohio Valley. If it were to stall out over water or close to water near the South Carolina coast, rain flooding would not be a huge deal around here at all, nothing like Matthew. Peak winds would stay the same, whether it moves inland and dies or whether it moves south, because our highest winds will be as it's a hurricane approaching landfall. So same winds in terms of the peak winds. What would be different, those winds would last longer. They'd be tropical storm force. They would last much longer, so the tides would be considerably higher. Here's the wind potential coming from the European, and you can see winds up, tropical, almost to tropical storm force strength as we get into Friday. Severe winds down to our south. But then by Saturday, again, if some of the models are right and it's inland, these are all, cut these in half or even less. So we're starting to see the tides at that point maybe hold steady or even drop. If it stays near the coastline, the tides would indeed probably still go up for another day or two. So that's why that might be one of the things we have to wait another couple of days to really figure out exactly what the tides are going to do. Speaking of that, Evan Stewart is standing by with a little more information.
That's right. We'll look at some of the forecast tides that are out there right now, keeping in mind that if that storm stalls, some of these water levels, especially beyond the forecast period, could start to go up. First, a point of reference, a lot of folks who are around here for Isabel wondering, well, what were the tide levels back then? We got up to 7.89 feet, and that was almost up to the 8-foot level, which is where we were with the big one, the Chesapeake Potomac hurricane way back in 1933. Even Ida, a combination nor'easter and Hurricane Ida back in 2009 got up to 7.7 feet. And back in 2011, we had Hurricane Irene, 7.56 feet. And I'm sure a lot of folks remember the Ash Wednesday storm. If you've been around here a long time, we got up to 7.22. So looking at the tide levels as we go into Friday morning, keep in mind that the storm isn't even expected to come ashore, if it does so, or get close to the coastline until late Thursday into Friday morning. And with that prolonged easterly wind, those tides starting to come up to about 5.4 feet. That's minor tidal flooding bordering on moderate, which is 5.5 feet. And some of the computers are indicating that we could get up to 6, 6.5, or 7 feet as we get into Saturday and into Sunday if that storm does stall off the southeast coastline and we get several days of those easterly winds, Jeff.
Exactly. So that's going to be the real difference here in terms of our tide levels. If this storm is inland 2 days earlier and has weakened to just a tropical depression, or if for a couple of days it's drifting down toward this position near the coastline and we still have those winds coming in. So we will have a lot more information, of course, over the next couple of days, and we will certainly be back here throughout the next hour or two. In fact, it ought to be, what time is it? 10:20. Ought to be in about another half an hour. We get the very latest update coming in from the Hurricane Center.
But you anticipate that will continue to show this trend?
I would think so, until they probably won't move it much until an entire run comes in again. The fact that the 18Z model, the mid-afternoon model of the GFS, the American model, now that shifted way south, that's new since those updates, I think that will allow them to shift it a little bit south. Okay. They don't want to jump the gun, but I think they'll move it a little bit slower and south, not for landfall. The landfall is going to hold in stone or close to it near Wilmington. After landfall is when they would then move it south, not for landfall itself. And again, once we get the updated computers in the middle of the night, if those show the same thing, then they'll definitely trend day 4 and day 5 more to the south.
Good enough. All right. We'll be waiting. All right. Thanks.
When we come back, we verify how important water is for your emergency kit. Stay with us.
Back now with a familiar sight across the region. 13 News Now reporter Evan Watson spotted this set of Virginia Beach Harris Teeter on the left. Take a look right there. That's the supply at 10:30 this morning. And then on the right, the supply just 2 hours later. That is a completely new pallet of water bottles. As water flies off the shelves, we're hearing from some of you asking how necessary the mad rush for water really is.
That's right. The Verify team is on it. 13 News Now Verify reporter Jason Puckett found the answer.
Every time a hurricane starts barreling towards the state, you start seeing social media posts like this. The shelves for bread and water are always empty, and you start seeing dozens of posts saying stock up now. But keep in mind, we're still a few days from Florence's landfall, so do we really need to run out and stock up on water? Well, let's verify that. Our sources are FEMA and the Red Cross. First up, Jonathan McNamara from the Red Cross.
What we've seen in disasters across the country is that some people will find themselves in a situation where rescue workers can't get you for a number of days. The families that take those steps are in a much better situation than the families that don't, because it could be days before rescue workers can get access to you.
Both FEMA and Red Cross list water as #1 on their checklists for storm preparedness, and they say about a gallon per person per day will do the trick. And McNamara says even if those lines are long and the storm path looks like it's not going to hit you,
better safe than sorry. In these situations, the tracks of the storms are uncertain. That's the beauty of a hurricane, is it's going to give you days in advance to take those steps to prepare.
And FEMA details their best practices for building that emergency supply. In addition to 1 gallon per person per day, they say buy bottled water when possible, use plastic 2 liters if you fill your own, avoid glass containers as they could break, and boil any water you're not sure about before you drink it. So while it may seem daunting to go stand in a long line or go store hunting to find supplies, experts say having water on hand before the storm is crucial to making it through. That's verified. And folks, we're going to be diving into a lot more topics as Florence continues to approach the coast. If you have any questions you want us to look into, send us an email. With your Verify, I'm Jason Puckett. Back to you.
All right, Jason, whichever the way the wind blows, the Verify team is here to help. If you see something about the storm online you don't think is true, get our attention on Facebook or Twitter. You can also email the team at verify@13newsnow.com. Next, our extended storm mode coverage takes us to Virginia Beach as the resort city braces for the possible effects of Hurricane Florence.
Then we are live with how you can prepare yourself for the potential of power outages.
Water does almost the exact same thing. It gets it.
13 News Now continues in storm mode as we monitor a potentially dangerous situation.
Hurricane Florence is churning off the coast. Its effects yet to be seen. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Regina Mobley.
And I'm David Allen. The track has shifted, but Florence remains a dangerous hurricane. Chief Meteorologist Jeff Lawson is monitoring the very latest for us. Jeff.
Yeah, we are very, very confident what this storm is going to do for the next 3 days. After that, well, it's quite literally, no pun intended, up in the air. We're going to talk about the various possibilities and how that would affect Hampton Roads. Right now, you can see a little bit of rain out in central Virginia. We're, of course, mainly concerned not with that, but with what is going on in the tropics. And as you can see, this pink-colored area, sort of salmon-colored, that includes Mobjack Bay all the way down through the south side. It includes the peninsula from Poquoson back down into Hampton. That's a tropical storm watch. That means watch out. We might get tropical storm force winds eventually by Friday. If we do, big difference between 40-mile-per-hour winds and 60-mile-per-hour winds. That would be the difference between a couple of trees coming down and hundreds of trees coming down. So that's something we're going to have to watch for. We don't think it'll get up to the 60-mile-per-hour sustained category like we had with Isabel, but we could still have some of those problems. So that is what we're going to talk about over the next day or two. This orange area is a watch as well, but it's a hurricane watch. It means hurricane strength winds are possible. And then from the Albemarle Sound south through the Nags Head, Kill Devil Hills and southern areas south of there, that's when we're talking about a hurricane warning, again, until Friday. Something new that wasn't out there yesterday, but we had started, well, actually, we had talked about it yesterday, was a storm trying to form in the Caribbean, and whether that would influence, well, it's really starting to get together. Looks like about a 50% chance in the next 2 days, 70% chance in the next 5 days. That develops into Joyce, Tropical Storm or Hurricane Joyce. If that happens, those are pretty close together. The wind fields would begin to affect each other, and that's why day 4 and day 5, at least partially, are now changing. Isaac going to get caught by the, Isaac going into the Caribbean. Helene going to get caught by that cold front and move harmlessly to the north. So here is the storm. Very powerful storm. Notice that for a little while we had some dry air starting to wrap in. That color you could see all the way down to the ocean. Now a little less noticeable. A Category 4 storm, winds gusting to 165. We will get important updates coming in very shortly. There's literally, I don't think there's a model out there, a real reliable model, that doesn't bring it right here to shore between Camp Lejeune and Wilmington. Very confident on that part of the forecast through day 3. Day 4 is when it starts to move out. So through Friday is day 3. And then it's what happens after that. I think they're going to adjust this somewhat slower and a little bit down to the south. Some of the newest computers this afternoon, couple of really good ones, bring it like this and then drift it over to here, similar to the GFS and the Euro, except for inland. They bring it down along the coastline offshore. That would really play a difference around here in terms of not so much the winds or the rain. It would really make a difference in terms of whether we see tidal, or how much tidal flooding we see. Again, here's the Euro. The GFS does the same thing, brings it near Wilmington, and then heads it to the south. So if it stalls at the coast, if it's near the water instead of inland, either way, rainfall flooding would be a little bit of a deal here, but not a huge deal. Peak winds would be similar no matter which move it makes. The tides, though, would be higher because those winds would last a couple days longer and allow that tide cycle to just keep building and building. That's why we can't really give you more than a range for the tides yet as to what they will be. But some impacts here locally. Take this storm very seriously, even if it makes that move south. We'll talk more about it coming up.
Jeff, thanks again. Florence, a Category 4 hurricane likely to make landfall along the coast of the Carolinas on Friday.
It is a very strong storm, and forecasters are concerned that once it hits, another system might just hold it in place, dumping several inches of rain.
Here's 13 News Now anchor Brian Farrell.
From Charleston to Columbia, from Myrtle Beach into North Carolina and Hampton Roads, more than 1.5 million people are heading one way, away from danger.
Enough clothes for, I'd say, about a week in case we can't come back right away.
Jennifer Forte and her son Robbie piled their dog into the car and didn't look back. Her neighborhood floods during storms. They're headed to Greenville.
We're on the island. We have to leave.
We don't have a choice.
It gets really scary out here in storms.
Yeah.
The Sessoms family already is on the road.
We're escaping Hurricane Florence. We live in Wilmington, North Carolina.
The Sessoms were stuck in traffic on their way to Asheville.
Good luck to everybody out there in the path of Hurricane Florence.
The eye of the storm only is getting bigger, and hurricane supplies like bottled water are getting smaller.
I'm getting it for my sister, my brother, my dad, and my children.
The governors of North and South Carolina say their evacuations are mandatory.
This storm is a monster. It's big and it's vicious.
In South Carolina, they cover most of the coastline.
We are in a very deadly and important game of chess with Hurricane Florence.
So many families on the roads are headed to cities like Raleigh, where forecasters worry the storm could stall and bring 35 inches of flooding rains.
Get up to Raleigh and get things ready at the house up there because it's not looking so great for there either.
Jeff Nichols said his wife wants to leave, he wants to stay.
It can divide families when some of the family wants to leave and some wants to stay.
The Johnsons are having a similar debate. She wants to obey the evacuation order. He's not so sure.
We're packing like we're leaving, but we're hoping that we get to stay.
Soon after announcing that plan, a hurricane alert lit up their phones and may have changed their minds.
Is that my sign?
No,
We need to look at the news.
Brian Farrell, 13 News Now.
The rush to get ready for the storm has put a squeeze on supplies at local stores. We stopped by the Harris Teeter near the oceanfront in Virginia Beach. Stores are trying to keep stock, but you know it, water, milk, bread flying off the shelves.
I'm stocking up. The storm's on its way. So I'm going to make sure that I'm properly prepared.
Because I don't want to come out here in the pouring down rain.
If you are grabbing essentials, remember to get cash. If we deal with power outages, you may not be able to use an ATM or your credit card. Let's take a look at other things you need in a storm.
When severe weather hits, power outages can quickly follow. Dominion Energy has already started to gather crews together and put equipment on standby. If the power goes out in your neighborhood, don't assume Dominion knows about it. You can report an outage to the number on your screen. It's 1-866-366-4357.
And Norfolk is opening 5 shelters tomorrow at 1 o'clock. The doors will open at Crossroads School, Norview High, and the Southside STEM Academy. If you need to bring a pet with you, the Bayview and Berkeley Community Centers also welcome animals. Again, all 5 shelters will open at 1 o'clock tomorrow. Chesapeake's shelters also open tomorrow. Shelters in Virginia Beach and Gloucester will open on Thursday. You can find a full list of shelters on the 13 News Now app. Just tap the weather tile and slide over to the Hurricane Center. We've also posted the information on 13newsnow.com. Next, another check on Hurricane Florence with our chief meteorologist, Jeff Lawson.
Plus, the Verified team looks into claims about hurricanes. 13 News Now will be right back.
All right, we're talking about Hurricane Florence and letting you know what's going to go on with that storm. We've been showing, of course, a lot of different scenarios. People are, saying on Facebook, what is it going to do for here? What's it going to do there? We're trying to tell you what we know and what we don't. So let's go over that again. What we know, we can start with, is that we are under a hurricane watch from the state line south, but that's a pretty small area. Hurricane watch means we might get hurricane conditions. A tropical storm watch is from the state line north, including parts of the peninsula, that from Pocosin basically through Hampton. That means we might get tropical storm force conditions. I've been emphasizing, let's say we get tropical storm force conditions. There's a huge difference in 40-mile-per-hour sustained winds or 60. When Isabel came through, we had 60-some mile-per-hour sustained winds. That brought down thousands of trees. That would happen again if we get sustained at 60. It does not look like that is likely. It looks like we'll probably have more like 40-some mile-per-hour, maybe a few gusts to 50 or 60. If we get that, it's likely to mean fewer trees, but that is something that's going to be very difficult to predict. Again, the hurricane warning then, from around Nags Head, actually from the Albemarle Sound down to the south. That means hurricane conditions are likely. New fly in the ointment is an area of low pressure developing here west of Cuba. That could interact, in fact, should interact at least a little bit potentially with Florence. The big news, though, will be high pressure as it builds into the north, and how strong it gets and whether it's over Ohio or whether it's over Pennsylvania or whether it's over New York days 4 and 5, because that'll allow the storm to slip in a little bit different direction. Here it is, well-defined eye, Category 4 storm. Any minute now, we should be getting the 11 o'clock advisory. Thinking it'll be a very strong Category 4. Can't even rule out a Category 5 eventually, well offshore. And then as it works towards shore, a very, very powerful storm as it sits Thursday, not that far off the coastline here, east of Wilmington or southeast of Wilmington. Then it just sort of grinds, not quite to a halt, but goes into shuffle mode instead of sprint mode and ends up right near the coastline here Friday afternoon. That we know. This will be within 40 miles of where it occurs. I'm 90% confident of that. The question is, where does it go from there? And at that time, 115 mile-per-hour winds here in the eye of the storm, not out here where the labels are. That is showing what is happening with the center, the eye of the storm, 115 mile-per-hour winds. And then by Saturday, down to just 45 mile-per-hour winds. And then Sunday, I have a feeling they're going to have to move this, would be 30 mile-an-hour winds. So we would end up with a day or so of tropical storm force winds. If instead, like some of our other major models are now calling for, the storm heads back down the coastline, near the coast, that would allow it to keep its winds going for longer. It wouldn't mean much difference, and it would shift somewhat the heavy rain. The heavy rain would be closer to the center instead of up here into central North Carolina. So it would make a little bit of a difference where the heavy rain goes, but it still wouldn't be here, the heaviest rain. Again, here's the GFS model, brings it to the south. The European model gets it up near Wilmington, brings it back to the south again. So a lot of consistency there. A couple of other really good ones. One that did great with Matthew, the H-Wharf, does the exact same thing, but gets it up to about here, just inland, and then swings it south, sort of southwest. So that'll be something we'll really have to take, into account and see where it ends up doing that little bit of a stall. If it stalls at the coast, rain flooding would not be a huge deal here. If it stalls inland, rainfall flooding will not be a huge. So rainfall flooding in general does not look at the present time like it will be a huge deal. It may cause some problems. The peak winds are going to be similar whether it moves inland and dies or whether it stays offshore and continues to be a Category 3 storm, let's say. Our peak winds would still only get up into the tropical storm force category. The huge difference would be it would last a lot longer. Those tropical storm winds would last 2 days longer and allow those tide cycles to continue to build. Speaking of the winds, the probability of hurricane force winds 10% for Hampton Roads, 20. That has shifted, by the way. They must have put the new advisory out because that has shifted south. And you can see 20% then for northeast North Carolina. The probability of 40-mile-per-hour winds, that looks like the exact same one that they had out before. So we're continuing to watch for a high probability, almost a guarantee of at least tropical storm force winds in areas down to the south. I'll be back in a few minutes, and I have a feeling by then we're going to have that new advisory.
All right, Jeff, we'll look forward to that as all of the news about Hurricane Florence stressing you out. Next, how to get that anxiety under control.
And rumor has it that hurricanes are getting stronger every year, but is this true? We verify right after this. Back now with a quick word on dealing with storm anxiety. The experts say that tightness in your chest and gut is normal during times like this, but there are steps you can take to reduce that anxiety.
See, the problem is that we believe that we're in control. And so the storms and stuff remind us that we are not really in control of anything. Make sure that you know that your home is prepared. Make sure you have your supplies.
Experts also say it's okay to talk it over with your loved ones or anyone who can offer help. Well, earlier this year, a study claimed that hurricanes are getting stronger than ever.
The American Geophysical Union found the storms are strengthening at a faster pace than, say, 30 years ago. Meteorologist Tim Pandages set out to verify their claim.
Let's look at last season when Harvey, Irma, Jose, and Maria, all major hurricanes, rapidly intensified. What does that mean? By definition, to be called a rapidly intensifying system, the storm must increase its maximum wind speed by at least 29 miles per hour in 24 hours, as well as decrease its minimum central pressure by at least 24 millibars in a 24-hour period. So what is the root behind this recent growth in stronger hurricanes? According to the study, it appears to be a natural climate phenomenon that warms the oceans where hurricanes typically form. It is called the Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillation, or AMO. This controls the temperature of the North Atlantic between warm and cold. And since the 1990s, this cycle has been dominated by the warm phase, leading to much more fuel available for developing tropical systems. It is important to point out that the study shows rapid intensification of storms isn't happening more often, but when it does happen, the storms that do rapidly strengthen do so at a faster pace and get stronger. The study also says that it cannot rule out the role of man-made climate change in this recent discovery. Tim Pandages, 13 News Now.
All right, there's a lot of misinformation out there online. If you see something you want us to verify, reach out on Facebook or Twitter. You can also email us at verify@13newsnow.com.
We could see a very high storm surge even without a direct hit. Here is a look at what that could mean. A storm surge around 5 to 7 feet would send water into homes and businesses. When that gets up to 7 to 12 feet, that's enough to fill the first floor of a building. 12 to 15 feet puts homes underwater, and when you get all the way up to 20 feet, the storm surge could just overwhelm entire cities.
All right, where the latest update is coming in right now, it's in the process of coming in. It looks like they've made a significant shift in the forecast path, I think, like I've been talking about. So we're going to follow that up in just a minute when it finishes coming in. Right now, as you can see, the storm is continuing to be very impressive. Textbook pattern, maybe not a textbook category 5, but this is a textbook category 4 storm. The guy that developed the method of telling from just satellites how strong a hurricane would be, Vern Dvorak. I worked with Vern Dvorak when he was first coming up with the model that determined how strong hurricanes were. So trust me, this is a classic looking hurricane, perfect outflow boundaries, and again, continuing to work its way inland. So we're going to get that new update in, and we'll be back in just a few minutes telling you what that means for us.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for watching this special coverage of Hurricane Florence.
We'll have much more on this storm in just a few minutes. That latest update as it continues to come in on 13 News Now at 11. We'll also have live reports from our crews in the field as we continue to follow this storm as it sets its sights on the East Coast.
This is something we didn't have in the shows.
I'll just use this one.
Right here?